Mrs. Mr. and Mrs. McMannis, and I think we got an interesting session this morning. So, Greg, the floor is yours.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to thank Raymond and Virginia Hopper for inviting me, and boy, it's a real honor to be here. I don't speak very much. This is probably the second time since I retired. Also like to thank Ron Cutter for helping me put this together, and also the amazing job he's done restoring that Cobra back there, and the people that's helped him with that. Story about that Cobra, it came from Fort Drum, New York, and they took about 3 months putting it back together after it was mothballed, and they sent me out as a chief test pilot in the United States to go make sure it could fly. So I took an unsuspecting new lieutenant that's from Whiteman. His name is Tom Burson, and he and I flew it back all the way. Never been flown, I think, for about 10 years, and flew it back here. Tom now is the full bird colonel that runs the Whiteman Air Force Base Apache unit up there. So he did survive that. But coming back, I don't know who was there, but I think Mr. Hopper was there. And so I thought, since it was the last flight, that I would come over to the airport at about 4,000 feet, turn the engine off, and do a 720 auto rotation to the ramp at the aircraft, just to say, there it is. And it's a shame to see all the things they did demilling it after putting it together for 3 months. It took probably a week beating it all apart. And that's, again, I wanted to thank Ron for all the work he's done to make it look as good as it's done. So that's pretty neat. About a year ago, the last time I spoke, one of my pilots that I flew with in Vietnam, he is retired. He's for Life Flight, works at Cox, and his name was Steve Allen, and he was the last Vietnam aviator. I was second to the last to retire in the state of Missouri, and they asked me to do a presentation, and they wanted it to be the end of an era, which made me think about this for a minute. So that's kind of what I wanted to go on here and talk about how it really is not an end of an era. Because just talked to a gentleman that's from Korea and Vietnam, and the guys I started with, like what you gentlemen are going to start with, were World War II pilots. One of them flew a Pappy Boyington out of Whiteman, P-51 pilots, B-17 pilots, and they were my mentors when I started out. So, and they didn't feel that was the end of an era, because they perpetuated what we've been doing. So I'm just going to kind of sit down. I'm not going to talk much about me, because that's kind of boring. So my life started flying. This is a picture of me. Can't amazing how much you can age in that many years, but I'm on the left at Dong Tam, Vietnam, which is down in the Four Corps on the river there. And that's, again, it made me wonder about an end of an era. So 41 years later, I retired. And I have to tell you, in aviation, it's just as much fun when I started. I started in 1964 flying. I started flying when I was 15 and got my pilot's license before I got my driver's license. In fact, when I went to the airport, I didn't have my license, so I had to have my mom drive me, and I was kind of embarrassed because all the pilots were out there, so I asked her to park at the end of the parking lot. And I had my commercial multi-engine instrument rating before I got out of high school. So this was something I always wanted to do, and it's just as much fun now as it was years ago. What I was going to do is start about the start of most of us Vietnam aviators' careers, and that's how we got started. Most of us saw this card up here, which is a registration or draft card. And so most of us that flew thought it would be, or wanted to fly, it would be a lot better to be in an aircraft than walking around out there in the mud and the dirt and with the booby trap. So that's how most of us got started. Most of us started, the primary training was at Fort Walters, Texas. Prior to that, aviation was at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. That was the head of Army Aviation. Because it was mostly grasshoppers, the Cubs and fixed-wing aviation, and they had some Hillers. And this is an old Hiller aircraft. And then at Fort Walters, they ended up with it's called a Bell 13, the old lead sled, and a brand new aircraft that came out was a TH-55. And nobody really wanted to fly that one, and I'll tell you here in a bit. But this is the old aircraft I used in MASH. It was my advanced instrument trainer when I went to Hunter Stewart, you can imagine. But here you had 35-gallon tanks of gas, avgas, on both sides, right above the exhaust and the engine here. So not a good idea to take something like that to combat. This aircraft, well, they called it the lead sled. It would barely fly. But why most of us pilots didn't want to fly this aircraft, the TH-55, because they had this new complicated pre-flight procedures, and it was like two and a quarter pages, and we were like amazed that they actually wanted us, and the other aircraft was just almost like on a 3x5 card, and we thought, my gosh, this thing is complicated. I should bring you in the Apache's pre-flight book. It's about like this. It's 44 pages thick just to get through to start the engine. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, well, I'm sorry. It was 3.5 pages long, so that's why nobody wanted to fly something that complicated. And sweating check rides, this was a huge thing, and it takes almost 4 days and 2 nights now to do a check ride because of the complex aircraft that we fly in. It's called air crew coordination and crew integration. But this is all we had to worry about. Basically, if you could take off, go around a traffic pattern twice and land, and go find a hill to land on, you were done. That was, but we thought, man, we'd sweat that, just worried about it. This is a thing that we did years ago as warrant officers. You started out in pre-flight, and you went 9 months together. And it was a spirit of cooperation. It was a cooperate and graduate. If one person did something, everybody had to do it. Because that's just how it was. So every class every 2 weeks we had a flight class, and there was about 100 of us in each class. And we would capture the battalion commander, the acting battalion commander, and kind of put him away, and we'd take over. And what we'd do is everybody would designate, we're all candidate Gross. Actually, the first name was Max Gross, so that's how he came up with this name. And everybody would come up with a uniform, and we would, as long as we didn't tear up anything or do anything, we had the whole day to ourselves. But it reinforced this cooperate, graduate mentality. And it was really important because if one person went down on the ground, we'd all be down there with him. I don't know if you remember a few years ago in, I think it was Iraq, yeah, they had an Apache go down, and they left the aircraft there and blew it in place, and they had 12 other Apaches there, and I was thinking, well, my God, in Vietnam, all 12 aircraft would have been shot down because we never would have left that aircrew down there. And that was because of the cooperate graduate. A little different in flight school now. They go to flight school, the warrant officers go 6 weeks, and then they're made officers, and they don't live together. They go off and live in apartments or wherever else, and so it's quite a different feeling. They're not home together at this cooperate graduate. The other thing we do is whoever knew something like how to do aerodynamics, or who would know maintenance, or who would know ground schools, they would mentor each of us, and we made sure that nobody failed. Nobody could fail. And after 9 months, you could find out who the true temper of each person was. There was no way to hide. You couldn't just kind of scoot by, and you're going to find that out in West Point. After 4 years, you're going to know the thread count on each one's underwear, so you guarantee it. This is me at Hunter Stewart, and it was an incredible place to go to. We thought it was the horrible place because Fort Rucker, in our mind, was the West Point of aviation. And about 6 years after I came back from Vietnam, I went there, and I was like, my gosh, this was so much better. This is where all the people that either flew the Cobras or flew the Chinooks went to after primary flight school at Walters. So this was we didn't think of it. We were tortured more. At Fort Rucker, after 6 weeks of going from primary flight school, you would go to Fort Walters or Fort Rucker, Alabama, and you kind of had it made. It was kind of nice, but here it was like we're going to be the best of best, and and they harassed us all the way to graduation. So we were really ready to go to Vietnam and take it out on somebody after that. Now, that's Fort Rucker, where most of us went to, and you can see the difference between that, beautiful, right in the heart of Savannah, Georgia, and that, which is, it's not a bad place, but it sure isn't Savannah, Georgia. SOPs and ATMs, the standard operating procedures and aircrew training manuals. After I came back from Vietnam and I was in the Missouri National Guard in 1975, they finally printed an operator's manual for the Huey. I'd never seen one before. It was all word of mouth and somebody getting on your side and say, "Follow me, this is how you do it." Nowadays, the men, and I'm serious, the men that go to flight school now, it's a little over a yardstick high in manuals that they have. Everything's written down, how you do it, the standard description of how you operate the aircraft, and how the check ride will be conducted, and who's going to do what at what time, and even the verbiage that you're going to say. So it does make a difference, and I'll show you this here later on. When you graduated, you got a tactical instrument ticket and really a license to learn, because it was an OJT job. And this is our instrument ticket. I don't know if aviators, I know you probably recognize it. We weren't actually rated. I had a green card. Because I had an instrument rating by the FAA. But this was a tactical instrument ticket, the actual one, and it had a punched hole here. And it was only good to use if you held it up to the sky, and if it was blue, then you were good to go. That's what that was for. Otherwise, they said, put it in your pocket, you'll never use it. And if you go in the clouds, you'll die. I mean, they preached that over and over. And that was issued in July '69. After graduation, about 9 months later, every 2 weeks, they had a formation flyby. And then you had 2 weeks leave, and then you headed off to Vietnam. And they don't do that anymore at Fort Rucker. They don't have they said it cost too much money, and a general's wife didn't like it because the tradition got stopped because she was having a tea party, and the helicopters made too much noise. So, and I have to go back. We absolutely, as underclassmen, every 2 weeks you would see the aircraft go by, and you go, okay, only 8 months more. I mean, you would think to yourself, and pretty soon, as next 2 weeks, man, I'm going to be right there. And I can't tell you what it's like to have brand new aviators trying to do a mass formation of almost 50 helicopters in V's of 3. That was, if you survived that, you were good to go to Vietnam. Over in Vietnam, the unit stayed in place. So every few weeks, the first unit that went there, like we were men, I don't know if you saw the aviator with a picture of Mel Gibson, they'd go in place, and then they would hurry like crazy to figure out how to not kill themselves, and then every few weeks you got a new guy. And towards the end of the first year that the unit was there, everybody would pass on this word-of-mouth information of how we do it in our locale. And that's why we didn't have aircrew training manuals or actual standard SOP. And so the soldiers that stayed in place, and we got new ones every few weeks. And OJT was the only way of accomplishing what we call crew integration. So if you had a chance to fly with a unit just across the runway, they might say some verbiage that you never heard of because it wasn't the slang that our unit was using. And that caused complications. So we did get rid of that down the road. And we called all the new guys FNGs, fairly new guys, for the politically correct term. And nobody ever used their real names. I don't know, because you didn't want to even be around a new guy because they get you killed. You just go over here and do something, And after a while, you started, after 6 months, you kind of started calling them by their name. I was associated with the 101st Airborne, but only after Vietnam. The other thing that we do different in Vietnam than we do now, running the gunships or the slick, it wasn't your rank and it wasn't your tenure in country. is whoever could do the job. It's like a football team. If you got a quarterback or a baseball player that's the best pitcher, he's the guy you're going to go to. And he's the guy you're going to all listen to because he may just have the natural knack and the capability to get you through it. And nowadays, it's not the bad way, but they would put a captain in charge that maybe have 300 hours. The first time over in Iraq at Desert Storm, and they'd have W-2s, W-3s, W-4s that have thousands of hours, but he would be up there saying, "This is how we do it, man." And it would be an affront to his authority to say, "Wait a minute, guys, we've done this before, and it ain't going to work out very good." So that's a little different than the way we did it back then. But I'll have to tell you a little more down the road what's happening after Iraq here. And once you're promoted to aircraft commander, and if you guys seen a lot of aviators from Vietnam, they all have a mustache. Well, one, it was a challenge to authority because the brass hated mustaches. They thought it was, but it was the only thing we could kind of rebel. And in our units, in 4 Corps, if you were an aircraft commander or were in country 6 months, you could grow a mustache. And I had about 6 hairs on this side and about 10 on this side. So I did everything I could to cultivate that, to let them know that I had been there. But once you're promoted to the aircraft commander, you received your own ship and your air crew. Now guess what? Do you think they gave me the best ship of the line or the best air crew being the brand new aircraft commander? You got the aircraft nobody wanted to fly it. It was all beat to hell. And the new crew chief and the new door gunner that the FNGs that they said, "Hey, I don't want him in my aircraft." So you talk about trial by fire, going out working with all this. So that's kind of how you got started on that. You can see right here, there's about 6 hairs here and 2 over here. And the only other flaw we had back there was the best man for the mission. Now, since I had an instrument rating, I got stuck with all the night missions because I could actually navigate back to an FM hold in the middle of nowhere, and I could fly at night out there, as you will attest to. You could not see, you didn't know where you're upside down or right. There was no lights, no nothing, and if there was a lot of time during the monsoon season, there was just this overcast. And if the moon wasn't out, you literally could not tell what side was up. So on that standpoint, I got stuck doing that. So I was the best man for the mission, but most of the time, if you're the senior guy and you had like 3 months to go, he'd be able to say, "I ain't doing that stuff. You send a new guy. Send a new guy in that aircraft we don't like." So normally it wasn't the best man for the mission sometimes. This is my friend Steve Allen. He doesn't look like that now, nor do I, but he's the last man to fly, Vietnam aviator in Missouri. And he practiced cooperate and graduate. Remember I said if one person went down, the whole stinking unit would go down to make sure they weren't left alone. Well, Steve, his platoon leader, brand new captain, went down, got trashed out, and he went through a bunch of fire, picked him up. He got shot up, got his aircraft out, went back and picked up the rest of the crew. And the guy he picked up was Major Bill Williams. 2 years later, he went and he received a Congressional Medal of Honor, and he pulled out 4 downed air crew and was severely shot up. So the cooperate and graduate was passed on. But had it not been for Steve rescuing Bill Adams here, there would be a lot of other guys that wouldn't have made it back. So that was the important lesson that we learned on this cooperate graduate, cohesiveness. This is Iraq. I flew out of Balad, which is about 60 miles north of Baghdad, and I tried to get an exact size representation. This is South Vietnam right here. And where'd you fly? You flew at Pleiku, was it?
Yeah, Pleiku and An Khe.
Okay, Pleiku was right here. I flew out of Dong Tam. I had what's called the Parrot's Beak, and I worked the Cambodian border, which is a lot of fun. But you can see the size difference here.
And Michelin plantation too?
Hmm?
The Michelin plantation?
Oh, yeah. I know right where that's at. La De Manoi, Buko Omokai. Yeah. So this is, so you can almost see this is just, Not very much, and basically from here south. So you're talking about like just about this part of Iraq down here to Kuwait. This is the Tigris River, and this is the Euphrates. Kind of neat to be battling in biblical areas there. But in Vietnam, well, this is what's amazing about that poor aircraft that they tore up. We had 5,086 aircraft that were destroyed out of 11,000. That's not pretty good odds, is it? I mean, I went through 5 aircraft. My name of my aircraft was the Iron Butterfly, which I thought was appropriate. It was in Gata DeVita's music group that was going on, but I went through part 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, so I was a part of that number there. And the aircraft designed then weren't crash-worthy. These aircraft here weren't designed. There was $250,000 to $300,000 a copy to chunk them out, and it was cheap to replace me. It was cheap to replace those. So they didn't have the design, the crash dynamics that the Apache and Black Hawk has, and that was part of the mortality rate there. The aircrew members killed in Iraq, and a lot of this is because of the SOPs, standard operating procedures, and ATMs that we derived from all this horrific carnage. We only had 130 of us, and that's not bad and there was a lot of intense fire we took. Aircrew members killed in Vietnam, quite a difference. About the same time frame, about the same flight hours. And I have to say the intensity was pretty similar. In Dong Tam, we didn't keep track, but in Balad, the time I was there, we had 1,857 mortar rounds land in our compound. So it was pretty active. You knew they were outside there, and every time we took off, they would shoot at us. So. And this is something I found interesting that I put together. We don't have the missing in action on the other side. They think it's around 1 million. They really don't have records. They just kept sending people down the pipeline, and so it's either 4 to 5 million total casualties in Vietnam. In Iraq, and this is including civilian losses, which I didn't include in that previous one, 114,000. I mean, so you can see the intensity is dramatically different. So you can imagine add 1 million to that in this little area here to 114,000 during about the same time frame. So it quite different, except this was kind of all over. And these were just in the hot spots, Mosul and Talad, Alakut, and some of the other places. End of an era. Now, my good buddy here, this is in a C-23 I was flying, but no, they're still out there, and they're doing a great job. He's the assistant head of the state aviation office here in Missouri, and he's going to be the last aviation unit in Afghanistan. He's leaving here in September, and he's taking the last unit over there to fly. So, and that's a lousy way to earn a living, to come back and being the last man there, because you haven't got anybody to, I'm shot. Who's going to take care of me? So he's had an entire volunteer unit follow behind him, and I'm proud as can be. His name is Matthew Stiles. So he's a good guy. They talked about end of an era. Well, it's really not, because everything we had, these are aircrew training manuals, standard operating procedures, safety programs. We never had anything like a safety program. You just didn't report it. And crew resource management, how you talk to each other. It's like, am I clear on the left? And you go right. And, so there's a verbiage disconnect. And this is called Aviation Resource Management Survey, where they go through and check each particular item, how you tracked it, and made sure that everybody's doing it according to Hoyle. So really not an end of an era. Everything that we've done in Vietnam that we did by mistake is now in writing and is carried forward, and all these kids are using it now. And you can see the difference that's transpired from Iraq to Vietnam. I mean, the intensity was, they had guided missiles, and they had all kind of neat stuff shooting at us. I have to digress a bit, but the tactics we developed in Vietnam, exactly what I had them use in Iraq. In Vietnam down south, and a little harder up north because of the mountains, if you flew treetop level about as high as this ceiling, and you had a CNC ship maybe 2,000 or 3,000 feet up that could see the little specks on the ground, he could mark where the enemy was and say, okay, count, you got 2 tree lines to go. And you count, and as you come over the last tree line, you turn your systems hot, you pop up with the speed, you dive in and chunk them. The people on the ground, first you suppressed your sound signature, and the other thing is they couldn't really see you coming. Because by the time they heard you, you're over. The rate of closure at doing 150 or 120 knots at 20 feet off the ground or so is the same as doing 1,000 miles an hour at 1,000 feet. In Iraq, they had all the surface-to-air missiles, the man pads, the man-portable air defense systems. Well, we found that they could not shoot you unless they had a 10 to 12 degree azimuth, because it has a booster motor, and it would launch it. At first, it had 18 seconds to, if they saw you. You had to pull the trigger, and had to spool up the battery pack that spooled up the gyros, and had basically a freon system that would chill down the nose cone, because it would travel so fast that the nose cone, the seeker head, would get hot through the frictional forces of the air, and it would become myopic. It couldn't see your heat signature. So the Russians learned how to, and that's to chill it down. So it took about 18 seconds. So by the time they heard the C-23, the Black Hawk, or the Apache coming by, they picked up their stuff, and then they pulled it, they energized it, we were already gone. So those tactics that we developed a long time ago is what we used in Iraq. Great new aviators. He's head of the Gulfport Aviation Detachment. He's a major now, being promoted to lieutenant colonel. Tremendous guy. He took over after I left in Iraq, and his crew down in Mississippi doing great. The only problem we have with aircrew coordination between like people up from Chicago or Springfield and Mississippi is trying to understand what y'all, some of that stuff in there. So same language, but it's hard to understand sometimes. This is our aviators from Springfield. This is Major Vaughn. These guys were with me in Iraq. He's in charge of all the aviation programs in the 14 states here. He works out of the Missouri AvCrad. Really a super guy, and he's the head of the aviation safety office with me in Iraq. Of course, this is Major Stiles. And this gentleman runs the flight facility out there and all their maintenance and training. So these are guys who live right around you here that had a chance, and I have a bunch of them from all the other places in Missouri. Super good guys. So it's not an end of an era when you see the old guy gone, because these guys all have several thousand hours now of experience flying in combat. This little thing, I wish I knew the author, and I otherwise I'd have it up here. But it's dedicated to our fallen comrades in aviation, a gentleman that just passed away. And let me just go through this and take the time to let you kind of watch it, and especially in honor. And what was the gentleman's name?
Glassmeyer.
This can be for you. Oh, they did. This is right behind my hooch in Balad, where they bring in the medevacs. And once a week I had to fly to Baghdad for a tour briefing to brief all the other pilots. So that was with our other Black Hawk guys taking us down.
Are there any more Cobras flying in Afghanistan?
No Cobra. Well, the Marines, I can't volunteer for the Marines, but I flew the last Cobra in the United States and
So we can't tell they're flying. We can't tell if they're flying anymore.
Going back to using that irrigation canal, going back to farming.
Well, they're back fighting again. They're back they're back tearing each other up. They've been doing that for 8,000 years, and even Ray Charles could see that he can't straighten that mess out.
So they never learned anything, did they?
No. This is one of Saddam's palaces. This is, we're getting ready to fly into Baghdad here.
Does anybody ever take a pot shot out of a window or anything?
Oh, shit. Every time we flew. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that, but yeah. I always kept my pistol right here. There's 8.5 million people crammed in there, about the size of Chicago. And that was a bad part because you couldn't tell if somebody, like he mentioned, was shooting at you, where to come from, which window. And that was just sport for them. And you'd hear it go by. And there's no duck hunters in Iraq. They don't have lead an aircraft, so we weren't very too worried about it. If they hit us, it was always in the tail. Another palace for Saddam. Dust storm coming in. Didn't have weather stations out there, so you always were like, holy cow, look at this. That's another palace out in Lake Tartar in the middle of nowhere for him. He had it made. Man, I tell you. What are we doing? Firewalled, see, 190 knots. That's as fast as we go. This old aircraft has no hydraulics. It's all hand flown, and it's like a workout. All day doing that, it's pumping iron. You go home and you just can barely pick your arms up. They actually found sarin gas traces of it, never got recorded in those bunkers. It was out near Cuba. Pretty sunsets because there's always dust in the air. The Shorts Brothers, and I'll tell you a neat history about it. And as soon as this is over, I'll tell you what's so neat about that aircraft. A lot of people don't know about it. And they burned everything: body parts, brakes, carbon, and that stuff. I still cough, all of us do. And we reported it just like Agent Orange in Vietnam. They said, "Oh no, that's good air. It's not hurting." There's hardly anybody that hasn't come back. Doesn't have a persistent cough from that junk. Pretty neat. Birthplace of Abraham. They walk places like that and be exposed to it. I call them my kids. I'm 30, 40, but they're my kids. Started about 3:30 in the morning, and we got done around 9 o'clock at night. Every day. The Sherpa is built by the Shorts brothers, and it was an original. It was the first aircraft the Army ever bought. Most people go, how does that work? When the Wright brothers were over in Europe selling the Wright Flyer, they were competing. America wasn't a big deal then. It didn't have a lot of money. So they were over competing against Glenn Curtiss in Europe, and they were hoping to snag the Prussian, the German, and French, and the English contracts, and they didn't want Glenn Curtiss to beat them out. So they won this little contract for 3 of these flyers, and they didn't want to come back because they had the plans and all that to let Glenn Curtiss get the big prize. So they contracted in Belfast, Ireland, the Shorts Brothers Boat Building Company, and because they knew how to build wooden boats. And they said, well, spruce, wood, do it. So they built all the ribs and all the spars and got it together. They made sure it was assembled right and sent it back to the United States. And that Major LaFerrier was the first Army aviator. And there was a lady, I think it was somebody here connected with Orville Wright. My connection, I was taught in 1964 by Harry Lloyd. He was from outside Mitchell Field, just outside of O'Hara Airport. And he had a little grass strip, and how I learned to fly is I would cut grass and wax airplanes and do all that, and he'd trade, avgas was cheap then, he'd trade it for some flight time. But he, during World War II, taught the military pilots how to fly P-51 as a civilian contractor. But just as World War I was ending. He was in his 70s when he taught me. He was taught by Major LaFerrier, the first Army aviator, before he went to World War I. And he was, of course, taught by the Wright brothers. So a lot of my pilots, and there's been several of them, 1,000 or so, have always wanted my signature because it's just 3 removed from the Wright brothers as far as check rides. So that's, this is a, get this going here. I can get it to come up. This is our other unit, if you got the time. Out of Jeff City, our Black Hawk guys I trained. I was really fortunate. I got to fly about every aircraft in the Army inventory was rated in all the fixed wing and rotary wing at one time. So I was one of the few guys that got to fly in all of them. Is it going? Sorry.
Did you teach Mark McLemore?
Yes, I sure did. Mark's a good friend of mine. B.J. Thomas, Mark's second lieutenant, Mark McLemore. And he's now the full colonel in charge of the state aviation. And that's who I was with in Iraq. Incredibly good guy. Got to have those shots. Mom's always proud to have that back home. He looks excited. He was very polite. He didn't tell him to do something. 100, yeah, easy. But it's a dry hot.
That's cute.
All my kids.
That's great.
Now this one, when I retired, Mark McLemore and all these other guys, Bob Lanning, they all got together and took snippets of stuff that I'd flown over the years. So, and I got in trouble towards the end because you're not supposed to do certain things. And so I got chastised, but I was so close to retirement they let it go. So. AC/DC for you guys, you know, yeah, okay. This is a warrant officer's deal that I had it burned in, they can't get rid of it. They took that away from us here recently, but that's what they call the squash bug. That was our insignia. Oh yeah, these guys like it. You'll like it. Thunder, though, is the name of it. They're 2.7. That's a Hellfire. Vaporizes tanks. This is at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Sucks to be an Iraqi. That's my fat head in the front seat they're playing. Walking on a target, they don't escape. I can't show you what happened to it. That's part of where I got in trouble. That's what it looks like in the front. Melted them right into the sand. Kind of neat. I like that. Wide night vision goggles at night, no lights. Yeah, that's called compressing the strut, because that's the only way on a Black Hawk to get it to land. Otherwise, it just bounce along, so you crunch it in there. Oh yeah. It's crash where they hit the ground 100 knots in a sandbag and everybody walks away. They're built tough. This is where I got in trouble. This is a hammerhead that we used to do at the Cobra. Return, they call it return to target. So anyway.
Did you get to fly the stealth helicopter?
Well, it's just a Black Hawk with some plastic on it. I mean, it's really not stealth. It's not a big deal. It's just
not the bigger deal they talked about.
No. And I am grateful to have the privilege to do this. I've been on had a current flight physical and never had a waiver since 1964. So God's blessed me with some great health. The only thing that diminishes my eyes, and my grandfather used to say that's God's way of taking your eyes away so good old people look good to each other. You can't see the wrinkles. So.
Was that twin rotor a Piasaki, or what was that?
I'm sorry, sir?
That twin rotor one, was that a Piasaki?
That's a Chinook, Boeing Bertolds, and we use another acronym for it, but it started with an SH. They go pick up broken stuff. So, and that's my friend Matthew over there. And when I came back, I did do a stint. It's hard to quit. So I worked with St. John's here, and I helped them set up their night vision goggle program. And then after a year of flying, I had to pay $40,000 for extra taxes because I had 3 retirements, and I was like, "This is stupid." So I finally learned how to quit. So I do have one thing for you before we take, and I got a plaque coming. And I'm apolitical.
There's a plate up there.
Sorry, I'm apolitical. But this was, we shot at the Avcrat about 2 weeks after 9/11. And again, the words that our president at that time said was very profound. And you can see the old fat guy over here on the left with our Black Hawk. But I've got a plaque coming that'll go on that, but I wanted to give that to you guys here for all the good work.
Thank you. Wow.
So, I really appreciate it.
It was Bob Lanning, one of
He wasn't in that picture. We just, in fact, it was one of those things they just came and grabbed us all that was there and said, "Come out here." And so we weren't sure what was transpiring. It ended up on a lot of, I forgot, it wasn't Prime, but it was a large truck carrier that had that on the sides of their trucks for a while.
When you served over there in that desert country,
Yes.
Didn't you sometimes wonder what makes these people want to live in that godforsaken country?
Well, I'll have to give you, I'll give you an example. I saw my career being flashed through before my eyes because I was on the front page of the Stars and Stripes, and in 2006 I was on the front page of the News Leader here. And everybody at that time was wanting to know, because I'd been around, everybody said I taught Pontius Pilate how to hang glide, or I flew aircraft when they had dirt floors, all those good deals. They wanted to know how similar it was to Vietnam, the boondoggle that we were in at the time. And I had generals, I had Laura Ingraham from Fox and all these people sitting back here, and then behind them were the generals and the colonels. And I'm sitting at this table, and they asked that question, and I'm thinking, if I say it wrong, there goes, at that time, 39 years out the door. So I thought to myself, what can I say? And because I couldn't talk to them politically, I couldn't tell them what I really thought at that time. But I said, I'll tell you what, I can tell you what I see out of my window in Vietnam, at Dong Tam, and here at Balad. And they said, and I could see the general smiling back there, "Oh, this will be good." I said, in Dong Tam, we were in a little compound, and it was right on the edge of a river, and the enemy knew exactly where we were, and by 3 or 4 in the morning when we were getting up, they'd throw mortars on us because they knew we were congregating to go to chow. 5 in the morning, they'd throw mortars on us again because we're eating. About 6:30, they'd do it one more time because we're on the flight line, and they knew where all this stuff was. They had it all marked out. And then as we took off, the enemy, we go charging out as fast as we could, go past the barriers, and the enemy would shoot at us like crazy. Then for a while, you go over these vast wastelands of water, and basically water, and you'd see people in black wearing funny hats with their entire family out there doing just what they could to get by. We'd wave at them and they'd wave at us. It wasn't like Full Metal Jacket where we just shoot them, get some stuff. But they'd just wave at us, and we'd go on, and we'd go to the area where the enemy was, up near the border. And as we came in, the enemy knew we were coming. They'd shoot at us, we'd shoot at them, and we'd come back. As we came back, we were almost the same people, and they'd wave back. And they could care less what was going on. They didn't even have a clue, nor could read or write. And as we came into Dong Tam, they'd shoot the heck out of us. As we land, they knew we were post-flighting the aircraft and refueling it, so they'd mortar some of us. And then at dinner, they'd chunk some mortars on us. And then 2 or 3 in the morning, just to kind of make us happy, they'd throw some more on us. Okay, 39 years later, I'm sitting in Balad, Iraq. It's along a river, surrounded by a compound. You can see where this is going, can't you? So in the morning we'd get up, they'd mortar us. We'd go to chow, they'd mortar us. As we get in the aircraft, pre-flighting, they'd chunk mortars on us. And then as we scoot out, they'd shoot the heck out of us. And then we go over vast wastelands of sand, And there'd be people in black. Why in the hell people in the hot weather wear black? But they all wear black, and they're wearing funny hats. And they're out there with their entire family with their goats and chickens. And they wave at us, and we'd wave at them, and we'd go to like Mosul, and they'd shoot at us, and we'd shoot back, and we'd come back, and we'd land, and the whole cycle would repeat. So, and this is how I could see the generals knowing where this was going. I said, so as my little pilot face looking out my window, I don't see a damn bit of difference in what's going on here. But I didn't get in trouble, but it didn't make them very happy. But I did retire, so.
Lorena, aren't you glad they like it over there?
Yeah.
Don't stay with them.
Only thing I can tell these two gentlemen, or this gentleman that's going to West Point, the only thing I can remember doing all this stuff, either in Vietnam or Iraq or going through all the flight school stuff, the one thing, other than the camaraderie, which you'll have, is I was so tired all the time. You couldn't wait to do anything but take a nap on the dirt or anywhere, so you weren't being, but tired. That's the only thing I remember. So 4 years you'll be thinking, I'm tired. And I hope you pick aviation because it's a heck of a career. It's a tremendous way to make a living. Any other questions?
Well, Greg,
Thank you so much, guys.
I've been an old Vietnam person. I can relate to some of that and the aircraft we had to work on.
Oh, yeah.
Brought them back.
Where were you at, sir?
I was in Salina, Kansas, also in Mexico.
Yeah, Salina, Smoky Hills. I've worked with you guys out there a lot on the night vision goggle program and all that good stuff there. Neat group of guys out there. The safety officer, and I don't remember his name. He's retired, but he was.
Tremble, was it?
No, older guy, dark hair, never looked like he aged a bit. I don't know what he was drinking, but I never could find the right liquor. but a real good guy.
Well, I've got a grandson here. It's stationed out at McConnell.
Oh, great.
Wichita.
That's a great place.
Crew chief on 135. So he's
Good aircraft.
getting to play with planes.
Yeah.
So,
Made one single engine landing at the shorts out there once. Like it out there.
They started using so many helicopters in Nam and Korea. What about the usage of those in World War II? When did they really start getting to using the helicopters?
I don't know if they really used too many in World War II to do spotting work. They used the grasshopper because it didn't have the range and it didn't have the reliability. But they really came in vogue in Korea, of course.
My father-in-law was in China, Burma, India. They were using them for
Over there.
rescue in China, Burma. As
There
the
you
latter
go.
part of the World War II.
When I was 13 years old, they called them autogyros.
Well, yeah, I forgot the name of the
helicopter. They called them autogyros.
Well, there was I hate having some-timers, but there was a gentleman that started it before Sikorsky, but it wasn't a real helicopter that powered the rotor system. It was an autogyro. It had a pusher prop, and it would spin. You would get the aircraft spinning, and then the rotor spinning, and you drive down, and it would make itself work. And it was an autogyro, but it didn't have the hovering capability.
Our son-in-law will be back Monday night from Afghanistan.
Oh,
He was
wow.
one of the guys in that dark uniform.
Oh, yeah.
Not like the rest of the CIA type.
Talahashni, wana namadastuk, matashi korshat wamukishi. Assalamu alaikum, alhamdulillah. Ki harak mabsud. So I do speak Farsi.
So that's you got an interesting background. You really do.
Well, I've been blessed, and it just seems like it went like this. And I can tell you, and you know too, it just you get started, and I look back, and I've always been surrounded with young guys like you guys. So I never felt old until I'd walk by a mirror or window, and like, who's that old cotton top sitting there? And retiring has been tough. I put on 30 pounds because I don't have to run anymore. Yes, ma'am.
Well, Lorena was saying, haven't those people learned anything in all these years? But from what you're saying, haven't we learned anything in all
Well,
these
let me
years?
give you, and this is another synopsis I did, and I did get yelled at about this one. But, since biblical time, almost 8,000 years ago, and this is just my personal insight on how this works, from the Mediterranean to the Himalayas up to north of Turkey, every 25 or 50 years, whereas the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Syrians, the Babylonians, the Phoenicians, I can't even think of how many Eshians there are, but there was thousands of these guys, tribal area. And every 25 or so years, they'd go charging across and kill everybody off and rape all the women and hunker down. And then pretty soon, the stragglers and survivors of them would come in and do the same to them. And this went on from Mediterranean to the Himalayas, and for almost 8,000 years. I mean, prehistory. So, and I'm going to switch back to an analogy. The pit bull has been around for about 120 years, okay? And you can take a nice pit bull puppy that's never been mistreated and raise it up and love it, and maybe 4 or 5 years down the road, it may go across the street and just bite the living crap out of somebody, and it doesn't even know why. It just does it. And it's only been bred for 120 years. Think if you had 8,000 years of people raping, killing, and beating the snot out of each other, the inverse Darwinism that would get the crazies. I mean, a finite strain, they don't even know why they're blowing up each other, just because Grandpa's been doing it. But I think it's I hate to say it, but it's so skewed in their culture and possibly their DNA that you can't sort this out. Look what's going on in Syria. Look what's going on in Iraq. Iraq is kind of stabilized. We got rid of the despot. Now they're just blowing the snot out of each other. Of course, Iran's
can't get along with anybody.
Well, they can't get along with nobody. I mean, Muhammad, and I'm not despising any religion, but
I'll go ahead.
he was a caravan raider. And you can go back, and he was a caravan raider, and he slew people and cut their heads off and said it was because God told him to, and that their goods were for him because they were non-believers. So out of that seed, it's kind of grown and sprung that kind of mentality. You don't see all these people jumping up and down and screaming about somebody in Boston blowing up something. Everybody's quiet. You never hear anybody standing up in a mosque saying, "We decry that." I haven't heard anybody on news doing that or doing any of these things. But even in Syria now, you've got... I don't know how to solve it. I do know, but Harry Truman had that solution.
On the hill.
Yeah, just make it a parking lot and be done with it. But
Our next door neighbor made a statement pretty clear. It's called the Hatfields and McCoys.
Oh, yeah.
Ask them why they were fighting.
They don't know.
They were just fighting. And so we got right here at home.
Yeah, and Hatfield and McCoys, they did that for just about 30, 40 years. But
Well, my
8,000
grandson
years.
just got back from Qatar. Is the terrain there any different than from where you were?
No, it's hot. I've been to Qatar, and it's you still have people that hate you, and it's a nice area. An amazing amount of wealth through there in Kuwait. But you know, they say there was a dry heat. I guarantee you, when you're in the aircraft, I had 128 degrees one day. But when you're in the aircraft and there's no air conditioning, and you got your flak vest and your long stuff and a helmet on, it is god awful hot. That's why I weighed probably 35 pounds less. I just sweated it off. But yeah, it's I don't. And somebody asked the question, why would they live there? I would find another place. I sure wouldn't kill somebody over that dirt. I mean, it really wouldn't. I'd go find some nice, dry, cool place. Yes, sir.
You mentioned one of us here, indirect association with the Wright brothers.
Yes, sir.
Lorena right there.
That's. I heard, and when I was in there with Ron the other day, I heard a lady talking about with the Wright brothers, and I was fascinated hearing it. I was wanting to hear more, but I think that's just tremendous. I salute you. That's really neat. Part of history.
I'm glad one of our members is still here, because I'd like to rib him just a little bit. How many boats have you been able to see do what that helicopter did? Flip, aileron rolls, and what have you, and still be floating and keep on going. Got two Navy guys back there. I asked her for ask a little bit. One of them was a part of the service called the Coast Guard.
Oh.
He's not listening.
Yeah, that's called selective. I was going to say that's selective hearing. Yes, sir.
What was your altitude when you did all of that?
Probably about 1,500 feet, which is pretty high, because like a return to targets, when you saw us low level in Vietnam, as long as you kept these older helicopters, they had what's called an underslung hinge, or rotor head, and if you lost positive loading on it, it would flap and break the mast off. So if you just went up like this, low level, and you're doing 120 knots, you pulled it back, bled off your speed to about 30, the tail rotor would become ineffective, and it would just swap ends and come back down. But if somebody shot at you, that way you could turn around, the door gunners are stitching the guys, you could flip back, have your stuff armed, dump some rockets on it, and be gone. The only hazard to that was if you didn't pull out quick enough, you got a lot of that debris knocking your windshields out, stuff like that coming up at
You
you.
had some pictures